Today's video is brought to you by Squarespace, the easiest way to turn your business or idea into a beautiful and functional website. We'll hear more from them later in the video, but first let's talk about Auckland's growing train network. Because in recent years, Auckland has been on a bit of a public transport improvement streak, with impressive projects like the City Rail Link that's set to open as soon as next year, as well as less successful projects like the Airport Light Rail line that has unfortunately been cancelled. But the city isn't stopping there. A little over a year ago, Kiwi Rail unveiled what they called their strategic rail program that outlined a 30-year vision for Auckland's railway network. This vision includes a range of potential improvements, from station upgrades, level crossing removals, and even the creation of new express passenger services. However, the improvement I think could have the biggest impact on Auckland's transport network, and the improvement that's going to be the topic of this video, would see the creation of a completely new orbital train line. This line is called the Avondale and Southdown line, and as its name suggests, would run from Avondale in Auckland's southwest to Southdown in the southeast. The new line would be pretty unique for Auckland because, unlike the city's other lines, it wouldn't run through the central city and would provide a sort of orbital service through Auckland suburbs. It will also bring huge benefits to New Zealand's freight trains, as it will allow them to bypass the Auckland city centre, where the railways are often quite congested with passenger trains. Now, the idea for this line has existed long before the strategic rail program I mentioned was released. In fact, its origins can be traced all the way back to the 1940s. Back then, freight was going to be the line's primary focus because authorities of the time were worried that Auckland's railway network was not going to be able to handle the then growing volumes of freight rail traffic. At the time, and the same thing is still true today, a freight train that wanted to travel across Auckland would have to travel all the way into the inner city and then back out again. These inner city tracks were also often busy with passenger trains, so the worry was that there wouldn't be enough space for both. By building the Avondale to Southdown line, these freight trains would be able to bypass the busy city centre, meaning more capacity for them, but also more capacity for those passenger trains. However, the freight rail volumes envisioned by the authorities in the 1940s didn't end up materialising. In the second half of the 20th century, governments were shifting their focus to roads and highways, so a lot of the increases in cargo movement were handled by trucks instead. A lot of passenger railways also saw their usage drop as commuters turned to cars, as we can see here where public transport use dropped rapidly around the 1950s. This was in large part due to the dismantling of the city's tram network, but also in part due to people switching from trains to cars. This reduction in passenger train usage meant more capacity on the inner city part of the rail network for those freight trains, so the idea of this freight bypass lost steam. However, if we go back to the graph, we'll see the trend of declining public transport has reversed, and these days the city's passenger trains are being used more than ever. On top of that, when the City Rail Link opens, even more services are going to be added, and with the improved convenience the rail link will offer, I think we can expect passenger demand to increase even more. Additionally, the amount of freight being carried around Auckland is also expected to increase, with Auckland Transport projecting the amount of freight carried across the region to increase to 108 million tonnes by 2046. This means once again concerns are being raised about the capacity of the inner city parts of Auckland's rail system, and that has led to plans for the Avondale and Southdown line being revived. This time, however, the plans aren't just for a freight bypass and would see the line take passenger services as well. Now, I personally find it pretty frustrating that plans for major transport projects like these can take so long to get from idea to reality. But thankfully, the same thing isn't true for websites. I've recently been working on building out a website for my channel, and I was pleasantly surprised how quick and easy Squarespace made it for me to create a great looking site. They recently released what they're calling their Design Intelligence tool, which uses the power of AI to turn your website idea into a unique website template in just a few minutes. I just had to tell it a few details about my idea and what I wanted my site to be, and it did the rest. If you're building an online business, Squarespace has even made it easy to accept payments online. It's quick to get started, lets you manage all your payments in one place, and lets you offer your customers multiple popular payment options, like Apple Pay, Klarna, and more. So, if you have a website or business idea in mind, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to get started, go to squarespace.com/citymoose and use the code CityMoose to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Back to the Avondale and Southdown line, however, and the new line will begin just after Avondale Station on Auckland's Western Line, where it'll branch off and then run next to the Southwestern Motorway before reaching its first new station at Wesley. Now, it's worth noting that the locations of any stations on the line have yet to be properly confirmed, but I'll be going with what has been recently suggested. The next station will then be further down the motorway at Mount Roskill, which, if the Airport Light Rail project ever gets revived, would be ideally suited to provide an interchange with that line. For now though, the line will continue eastward and leave the motorway for a station at Onehunga, although it's not immediately clear if the station will provide an interchange with the existing Onehunga line. If we look at the alignment of the proposed railway, where it crosses the Onehunga line is not actually directly where any of its stations are, which means changing between lines would require leaving a station on one line and walking to a station on the other line, which wouldn't be super convenient. However, there is always the possibility these existing stations may be relocated to make these transfers more seamless, and I do hope this happens. If this new orbital train line is going to achieve its goal of improving the connectivity of Auckland's rail network, having fast and convenient interchange opportunities is going to be key. Regardless, the final new station of the line will be at Te Papapa, after which the line will run onto an existing section of freight rail track. Using this track, the line will then connect up with the main line at Southdown, where it will be able to provide an interchange with the eastern and southern lines. Now, how passenger services on this line will be run hasn't been fully confirmed just yet, so we don't know if the line will operate as part of a city-bound service, or if it will just run east to west with passengers transferring to city-bound services at stations like Avondale, Onehunga and Otahuhu. That said, it's clear the line would make a big difference to the interconnectedness of Auckland's train lines. Currently, all of the city's railways run into the city, with passengers wanting to travel from the city's east to its west, needing to travel into the city and then transfer to a different line. When the City Rail Link project opens, things will improve somewhat, as now some services will run across the inner city to continue to the other side. However, east-west travellers will still be needing to go into the city. But when, or if, the Avondale to Southdown line opens, people will be able to make those east-west journeys without needing to make such a detour, potentially allowing for more direct routes. Building out these sorts of orbital services is important for growing cities like Auckland. Not everyone's commute is from the suburbs into the city, and at the moment that's most of what Auckland's train network is designed to accommodate. This means currently people wanting to make these suburb-to-suburb journeys mostly just end up using their cars, but given solid rail options to make this sort of trip, we could see them start choosing public transport instead. As a result, this project could help diversify the kinds of trips people can make with the rail network, while at the same time expanding the network to cover areas that have historically lacked rail transport. On top of that, by allowing freight trains to bypass the congested inner-city railways, it would allow for more freight services to be run, as well as more capacity for the passenger services in the inner city. In turn, this should all mean both fewer trucks and fewer cars on Auckland's famously congested road network. But the question is, will this project actually go ahead? Well, KiwiRail seems keen to make it a reality and are pushing to get their 30-year strategic rail program approved and funded. That said, the project does come with quite a high price tag of $6 billion, which is similar to the total cost of the City Rail Link project. This high price tag may give the government some pause, especially after other recent projects, like the in my view somewhat mismanaged Airport Light Rail line, continue to see its estimated cost rise even before any work was done, which ultimately led to its cancellation. Additionally, the line would run through a lot of what is currently suburban land, which I'm sure would see it get a lot of opposition from the locals. With all that said though, the project definitely has a few points in its favour. Of course, there are all the benefits I've already mentioned that it will bring, but on top of that, thanks to the early planners of the line over half a century ago, KiwiRail actually already owns most of the land the project will be built on, which would limit the need for land acquisitions to see it get done. And while the government, rightly or wrongly, may currently be skeptical of taking on expensive projects like this, I think after the City Rail Link opens we may see them change their minds. We've already seen similar projects in places like London with the Elizabeth Line and Sydney with the Sydney Metro become huge successes after their respective openings. So if we see the same thing with the City Rail Link, it could reinvigorate the public's desire for transformative rail projects like this one. Which I think is important, because if Auckland wants to reduce its dependency on cars and trucks, forward-thinking projects like this one are going to need to be built, so that the benefits they bring can truly be realised. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you really liked it, you could consider supporting me on Ko-fi, it is always greatly appreciated. But, as always, I'm Kyle, aka City Moose, and thanks for watching.